Well, hello, and welcome back to another scary episode of Ghost Stories Told from the South. I am your host, Stephen LeBooth, and I got some scary stuff for you today. Well, here in Mineral Wells, Texas, it's very cold and rainy. Perfect spooky ghost storytelling time. Woo, can't believe it, man. It's episode 141, getting closer to episode 150. It means I've been doing this for 3 years, guys. God, time flies. I want to just say thank you to the listeners. Numbers are still getting better. Just keep on telling your friends about it and keep subscribing, and let's get some more members. Let's get some more people following this. But I'm glad you guys are here. I'm glad you guys listen. And thank you for you faithful listeners. But we got a good show today. Going to be doing some New Mexico today. Last week we did Oklahoma. Today, this next two episodes will probably be it's going to be New Mexico. So like I said, we're sticking to doing prisons, courthouses, and insane asylums and stuff like that. So, yeah. Oh, and I want to say the YouTube channel's going good too. Don't forget about that. And you can get this podcast on any platform pretty much. We're on Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, I believe, Amazon, iTunes, pretty much on all of them. So, but if you guys are ready, I'm ready. Let's strap in. Get you a nice warm blankie. Get you some cocoa or some coffee. Go snuggle up by the fire and hit play and get ready to be scared, my friends. Okay, our first story is Fort Union. Back in the days of the Wild West frontier, Fort Union was one of the last spots of civilization. One would have to travel many miles to find any other place where one could partake in social life. Among the ladies at the post was a young woman who happened to be the sister-in-law of a captain. She loved the variety and the spice of adventure to be found there. She also loved the attention that young officers paid her attention. A young lieutenant proved especially A young lieutenant proved especially how much he liked her. Here he would, with his charms, and devoted himself to her in hope that he would eventually win her hand, which means, he'd marry her, or they'd be boyfriend and girlfriend. One day, messengers came dashing into the fort with news of an Apache outbreak. The lieutenant was put in command of the expedition. But before starting, he confided his love to the young woman, who not only acknowledged that she returned his affection, but promised that if future of war prevented him of life, she would never marry another. As he bade her hand farewell, which means he kissed her hand farewell, I believe. He said he'll be back to her no matter what happens. In a few days, the soldiers came back, but the lieutenant was missing. It was noticed that the woman did not seem to grieve much for him, and nobody was surprised when he announced her intention of marrying a young man from the East. On the eve of her wedding, a dance was arranged, As the dance was in full swing, okay. As the dance was in full swing, a door flew open with a bang. A loud cry was heard throughout the dance hall. In the doorway stood the body of a dead man dressed in the stained uniform of an officer. His temple was marked by hatchet gashes. His scalp was gone, and his eyes were wide open. Woo. So apparently, like I said, when I'm researching it stuff, I kind of just glance through it. I don't read a whole lot of it. So when I read it to y'all and present it to y'all, I'm just as amazed and shocked and scared as you guys are. So apparently she fell in love with its lieutenant. He didn't come back because he got killed. But before they left, she told him she would wait for him. But if he died and didn't come back, she would never marry. Well, that was a crock of crap because she was marrying another person. And this is reportedly what happened that night. Pretty crazy, isn't it? That would definitely scare the crap out of me. Okay. The start of the death walls. He walked to the bride and took her from the arms of her husband. Then he began. Oh, okay. The start of the death waltz. I'm sorry. I need to learn how to read better. Then he began to waltz with her. A waltz was a big dance that they did back then. I mean, people still do it. Still here in America, but it's more at the old country bars and stuff. So I used to waltz a little bit back in the day. I couldn't do it now because I forgot. Okay, then he began to waltz with her. The musician who overworn declared that they did not know what they were doing, played though as bewitched. The couple spun around and around, the woman growing paler and paler until at least she died in his arms. The man allowed her to sink to the floor, stood over her for a minute, and his hands as he sounded his fearful cry again, then vanished through the door. A few days after, a troop of soldiers who had been to the scene of the Apache encounter returned with the body of the lieutenant. That's kind of crazy. This legendary death waltz is an eerie tale. It could simply be a great ghost story told by these soldiers to pass the time. Though maybe, just maybe, the eerie event did occur, and you might be able to witness it during a visit to one of the most haunted places in New Mexico, the Fort Union National Monument. That's what it's called now, but when it was first erected, it was Fort Union. Okay, now here's some more stuff I got on it, and let's see where this goes. Years ago, when all Maybound, Missouri was a waste, the military post at Fort Union, New Mexico, was the only spot for miles around where any of the grace of social life could be discovered. Among the ladies at the post was a certain... Okay, we'll go past the death waltz. We've already read that. Okay. Well, this is basically telling the same story that I just told. See, that's what I mean when I do my research on her. I just kind of glance. Well, yeah, that's the big story about that place, Fort Union, is the soldier. They still say that comes and visits the dance hall or the banquet room or whatever. And the female still shows up sometimes. So, look that up. That's a pretty cool story. The Fort Union in New Mexico. And look, and it's the Death Waltz. The story of the Death Waltz. That's pretty cool, man. Well, she shouldn't have fibbed and said, if you die, I'll never marry. And then, get married when he's dead. He wouldn't have came back and fucked with you. I would have just said, I'll wait for you, but if you die, I'm going to have to move on. But it sounds like this bitch moved on pretty quick. Pretty quick. All right. Our next story is the New Mexico State Penitentiary. Opened in 1885, the New Mexico Penitentiary had been authorized by Congress since 1853. The design was based on the same plans used for Sing Sing in Gillette. And go look up this prison. It's pretty big and intimidating. Well, that was the reason that they built the prisons. They build the prisons, especially like that back then. They try to build them more more big and bulkier and scary looking, to make you, be a good citizen so you're not going to be put in jail. But anyways, beginning in 1903, the New Mexico began the first western state to employ prisoners in building highways. The early prison industry in New Mexico produced bricks. On July 19th of 1922, prisoners all in the penright against overcrowding in the nasty food there and other stuff that pissed these prisoners off. And they was tired of the excessive force by the prison guards. When the inmates refused to return to their cells, when the inmates refused to return to their cells, the tower guards opened fire, killing one inmate and injuring five others. Five others. In their reporting following the riot, the prisoners authorized were blamed for lack of experience and failure to understand how to control a prison population. The second riot was, oh my God, another one. The second riot was June 15th of 1953. Inmates protesting the use of excessive force seized Deputy Warden Ralph Tahash and 12 guards and held them hostage in the mess hall. Guards killed 2 inmates and wounded many others. The second riot led to the abomination of the original faculty as a prison in the construction in 1956 of what came to be called the main unit. Wow. Jesus. Okay, guys, are you ready for this one? Another damn riot. Oh, man. I mean, I don't cover prisons a whole lot, but man. All right, let's get into it. The third riot occurred in 1980 and became the most infamous. It is often described as the scene of one of the most violent prison riots in the correctional history of America. In a 2-day period over where was I at? Damn it. Okay. Over 2 days, 32 minutes. Over 2 days, 33 inmates were killed and 12 officers were held hostage by prisoners who had escaped from the cell blocks in the main unit. Men were brutally butchered, dismembered, and disclaimed, and hung up on these cells and burned alive. Oh my God! This section of the prison was closed in 1988 and is now referred to as Old Main. The 1980 riot was an inmate rebellion that did not have a plan or leadership and lacked any defined goals. There were few heroes, plenty of villains, and many victims. When state police marched into the penitentiary of the New Mexico on February 3rd, 1980, they did not retake the prison from the rioting inmates so much as they occupied the charged shell after the riot had burned itself out. 33 inmates were found dead inside, some of them horribly butchered by their fellow prisoners. The emergency room at St. Vincent Hospital in Savannah was overwhelmed with more than 100 inmates. Some of them had been severely beaten while others suffered from drug overdoses. 8 of the 12 guards who had been taken hostage were also treated for injuries. It was amazing that not a single guard had been killed. See, that is weird. See, that's how the prisoners are, though. They killed more of their own kind than they did the guards, and that just don't make any sense. The riot began a black mark on the New Mexico history as the national press was captivated by the horror stories that leaked out of Santa Fe. The riot started in the early morning of Saturday, February 2nd, when guards entered dormitory E2 on the south side of the prison to do the nightly head counts. Making matters worse, the dormitory now contained several maximum security inmates that had been transferred there due to renovations in their cell blocks. In violation of prison security procedures, the door to the dormitory was locked after the guards entered the room to complete their rounds. The inmates charged the guards and subdued them quickly. Within the first few minutes of the riots, 4 guards were taken hostage using the key that had been taken from the officers. Inmates forced fellow prisoners that moved through an open grill gate, which was also unlocked, due to the administration area. Once there, they smashed their way into the main control center and gained access to every part of the main penitentiary building, where 1,157 male inmates were under the custody and care of 25 correctional employees. See, that's crazy. You have how many? Yeah, this building had over 1,000 prisoners in there, 1,157 to be exact. And you only have 25 guards to control. I mean, see, that's the biggest thing, man. If you're going to have these prisons, you need to have more guards. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's just asking for punishment. But don't get me on the prison system anyway. Anyways, this is ghost stories. Okay, employees. The guard on duty fled, leaving behind keys that could open most of the prison gates and doors. The inside of the prison quickly became a nightmare of desolation and violence. One occasional press reporter later described it as a story described worldwide as a merry-go-round gone crazy. Fires were set around various locations around the prison. The inmates had also ripped out plumbing fixtures. See, that don't make any sense. Why do all that? Because then where are you going to shit and pee? I mean, where are you going to do all that? I mean, they don't care. They just wanted to riot. Well, anyways. Flooding parts of the building, other inmates got into the where the medicine was and began taking drugs. As the riot escalated, so did the violence. Inmates who were gang members started hunting their enemies and found them. Then sometime around 8 a.m. That Saturday morning, they began using tools they had discovered in the prison to gain access to the cell blocks which housed the snitches and inmates in protective security or protective custody or whatever. Anyways, that was segregation where they was going into. The majority of the snitches met a horrible end, One unfortunately inmate was hung from the upper tier of the cell block. Another had been disembodied, chopped up basically. Before it was over, 33 of the inmates had died at the hands of the fellow prisoners. Some of the victims were also tortured and their bodies mutilated. At least 90 other inmates were seriously injured in the riot, suffering from drug overdoses or beatings, stabbings, and rapes. Oh my God. See, and there was raping each other. Rapes inflicted by other convicts. Most of the inmates had escaped Oh my God. Most of the inmates had escaped to the outside. Oh, okay. Outside of the walls. They were still in the prison, but they was in the yard where they play. By the time the riot was over. Early Saturday morning. Okay. Early Saturday morning, negotiations began with some inmate leaders. Ambulances shuttled the dead and injured to St. Vincent's. Smoke poured out of its prison gymnasium. Okay. That's crazy. I'm just kind of reading ahead a little bit here. Sorry about that. It became clear that neither the inmates nor the state had a single spokesman during the negotiations. Eventually, inmates made 11 basic demands. Some concerned necessary prison conditions like overcrowding, inmate discipline, education services, and improving food. They also had outside witnesses, federal officials, and the news media. Guards that were held hostage were released. Some of the guards had been protected by inmates. Others were brutally beaten. One who was tied to a chair. Another lay naked on a stretcher, blood pouring from a head wound. A reporter wrote, negotiations broke off about 1 a.m. Sunday, and state officials insisted no concessions had been made. But the riot, fueled by drugs and hate, was running out of gas. Later Sunday morning, inmates began to trickle out of the prison seeking refuge at the fence where National Guardsmen were armed with M16s. Black inmates led the escape from the smoldering building, staying in groups large enough to defend themselves from other inmates. By 1:30 p.m. Sunday, February 3rd of 1980, the violence had spent itself, and police and National Guards retook the prison without any resistance. After the riot, faculties were constructed to the north and south of the main prison. New prison faculties were also built near Las Cruces, Las Lunas, and grants to ease the overcrowding issues. Eventually, all the inmates from the main faculty were moved out to the other sites, and former Governor Gary Johnson closed the main faculty in 1998. Well, okay. Now, let's see what kind of hauntings we have. Many vengeful, angry spirits of the dead are said to roam the abandoned prison faculties. Brave travelers report hearing footsteps when no one is around, prison doors being slammed and shut, and sounds of men screaming in the distance. With so much carnage committed and hate filled here, it's no surprise that the prison is one of the most terrifying haunted places in New Mexico. See, man, I was wondering about that because you got to figure so much violence happened there. And, I mean, that's just full of negative energy. Big time. Okay, now I got some more stuff. The area of the prison where the most unusual phenomena are reported is cell block 3 and 4, the tool room and the laundry room. Cell block 3 was the maximum security ward, which also contains the solitary confinement cell. Activity reported here includes unexplained noises, a smell of burning flesh or death, doors that open and close by themselves, and lights that turn off and on without any apparent cause. Oh. Cell block 4 was the area where the snitches and other prisoners held in protective custody were contained. Upon entering the cell, there were marks on the floor where rioters used power tools to decapitate the snitches. God dang. And several other inmates. Jesus. Also visible are the outlines of scorch marks where other inmates were burned to the propane cutting torch. Oh my God. Jesus. Oh, man, there's no wonder that, man, this place is probably just full of some wicked shit. Another inmate was hung from the upper tower of cell block 4 with sheets and had been tied together. The activity reported here is similar to those reported in cell block 4. 23 of the inmates that were murdered during the riot were killed in cell block 4. Oh my God. That's a lot of dead bodies. The laundry was the site of several murders. Although they occurred long before the riot of 1980, it is located in a labyrinth of corridors that lie underneath the prison. These corridors also lead to the gas chamber, many mechanical rooms, and the tool room where the inmates stole the propane torches and other tools that were used during the riots. Rooms at the tool room where the inmates stole propane. Okay, never mind. I just fucking read that. Uneasy feelings and whispers are often reported down there, as well as strange human-shaped shadows. Man, I bet you there's some evil in that place. An unusual phenomenon has also been reported by correction officers and National Guards who used the faculties for the training. The commonly reported things are human-shaped shadows and the smell of burning flesh. I bet you'd never get that smell out of that place. Well, you got to think that place had, 3 riots? You know? I mean, that's crazy. 3 riots within 100 years. Man. So you know that place has a lot of boogly booglies. Well, okay. Let's take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back.
Well, how's everybody doing today? This is good old friend Uncle Dickie from Borderline Texas Trash, the most popular podcast in the world today. It's climbing up the charts faster than freaking slime on a stein, baby. Well, if you're wondering, what the hell is Borderline Texas Trash about? And who is its sumbitch Uncle Boo? Well, Uncle Boo is the most recognizable voice in podcasting today, babies. We gonna get funky like a monkey on some turnip greens. I'm coming in on white lightning, baby, on a silver saddle to bring you the best of Borderline Texas Trash, baby. I'm your host of the show, Uncle Boo. We go over everything. We do a little bit of politics at the end, but not much. I don't step into that bullshit a whole lot. But we have fun. I go over stupid world news of the day, talk about stuff from the past, what the cost of living or stuff was like that. And we just talk about all sorts of fucking fun facts, do a little joking around. And my niece joins the show sometimes. We do a little segment called Ash Handy's Garage on Friday nights, baby. That's our live show we do sometimes. And then I got the uncle that I talk to down in Boothville, Louisiana. And he calls sometimes. And we have a little show called Uncle Dickie's Corner. So you guys come check out Texas Borderline Texas Trash, baby. I know you will love it. We are on every platform you can think of. Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart. We're on everything. We're even on Podbean, man. We even got our own YouTube channel. We even got an Instagram account, and we got our Facebook account. So go check us out, man, and come listen to the show. You'll get to listen to Ash Handy, Uncle Boo, Uncle Dickie, and all the most recognizable voices in this motherfucking podcast in the world today, babies. Because we will get funky like a monkey, I guarantee it. Let's just say, baby, I've wined and dined with kings and queens, slept in dumpsters, ate pork and beans, baby. But I am your host of the show, Uncle Boo, Borderline Texas Trash. Don't forget about it. If you want to listen to a show to just get your mind off this crazy world and all the COVID and politics bullshit, come check my show out. Come check me and my crazy family out. Some of the shit we do live shows from the barbecue. So I'll see you later. Bye.
All right. Our next story is Fort Stanton in New Mexico. Indian uprisings in Fort of Stone. The place was always pretty empty. New Mexico had no more than 93,516 people that lived there before the Civil War. Of those, around 10,000 were Indians. There were enough of them to make trouble for the remaining population. Mostly whites who were settling in the territories, Indian country was increasing with numbers. Fort Sumter was built in 1855 as a base of operations for soldiers fighting the raiding Apache. Named for a captain who was killed fighting them, it's surrounded by ranch land and national forest in today's Lincoln County. The fort was abandoned and set afire by the Union soldiers in 1861 to deny its use to Confederate soldiers. But back then, though, they didn't have no way to check the weather or see if any rain was going to come. So when they went to leave and they set it on fire, it started raining. They had torrential rains that came down. It rained so hard it put the fires out. Then the Confederate soldiers took it over later that year, but only stayed a month before moving their forces farther west to Misila or Misila. They too set fire to the fort on their way out, and this time it burned. But the place had been built from native stone, so the shell remained for Kit Carson's volunteer command in Company in 1862. Fort Stanton was rebuilt after the Civil War and continued as a base of operations against the Apache until its closure in 1896. It became a merchant marine place and hospital in 1899. A civilian conservation corps work camp in the 1930s, and in World War II it was a and in World War II, that's where POWs, prisoners of war, went from Germany and Japan and the Japanese. So when we would ever, that's crazy though. You'd spend all that time and money to get them out of the country where you're having the war to put them over here, when it'd been a lot easier just to keep them over there. But I mean, keeps them out of harm's way, I guess. Okay, merchant soldiers and POWs, and it was again a state hospital after World War II. The non-profit Historic Provision Group, Fort Stanton Incorporated, successfully influenced the state of New Mexico to preserve the fort as a state monument and obtain a grant, a money grant to restore it in 1997. We lost out on weather for our own exploration of the nearby Valley of Fires State Park. We did not feel like trying to hike the lava fields in the drizzle after a decent breakfast. At Captain Smokey's Bar and Bear Restaurant, we decided to find... What is this? Oh. Okay, where was I? We just decided to find a relatively sheltered attractions. Fort Sumner was just 10 minutes down the road, so off we went. I guess this is somebody telling their experience of being there. After orientation and film at the excellent Fort Stanton Museum, we took a look at the fort's restored buildings. The barracks looked as if the regiment had been ordered after Apaches in the middle of some reaction. Cards littered a table, and a game of checkers was ready to play, but only a third of the rifles were missing from the racks. So the rest of the soldiers had to be around somewhere. The hospital wards had also been restored. I can't imagine what it looked like back then. Where was I at? Dang it. I might never walk away from this place again. The dry climate and fresh air helped sufficers, but weren't a cure. Though German physician Robert Koch identified the responsible breakout in 1884. A cure wasn't discovered until 1945. Okay, that story kind of went off there left. But they do have reports of course, soldiers. And there is an officer that roams the officers' quarters. And they say there's another soldier on a horse that roams around. So if you're ever in that area, go check that place out for me and report, baby. All right. Well, let me take a little break and we'll be right back. You ever look up at the sky at night and look at the stars and wonder, are we the only ones really out here?
Have you ever wondered how much our government hides from us?
Have you ever wondered why so many mysteries go unsolved? What really happens? What's the clues? What's the evidence?
Ever wonder if Bigfoot or Mothman is real?
Then, if so, come listen to this podcast called
What's really,
Really Out There.
And I am your host, Stephanie Booth.
And I am
my
your
father.
co-host, Stephen Booth Hafaja. And if you're into UFOs, unsolved murders, mysteries, unexplained stuff that happened, urban legends, we're into all of that. Conspiracy stuff too. We go dive into that. So if you're looking for a new podcast that tells that kind of stuff, then you need to listen to What's Really Out There. And we are on Spotify and iHeart and Pandora, I think. But we are pretty much on every platform. We have a YouTube channel channel. So go check that out. It's called What's Really Out There. So come check us out. Once again, I'm your co-host, Stephen Booth.
And I'm your host, Stephanie Booth. And this is
What's really out there. We'll see you at the next episode, guys. Well, this is our last story of the evening. This is Fort Bayard. God. Fort Bayard was established by General Carleton. Yeah, Carleton. Okay. General Carleton, a California volunteer at the base of the Santa Rita Mountains in southwestern New Mexico in 1886. The same year saw the beginnings of the great cattle drives northward from Texas to the railroads in Kansas. And many of those cattle came from New Mexico's grazing lands. The fort's mission was to protect those lands as well as the Pinos Atlas mining district from Apache attacks. The fort was named after General George D. Bayard, who died after being wounded at the Battle of Fredericksburg in the Civil War. Fort Bayard was initially home to Indian scouts and buffalo soldiers. Okay. Including William Cathy, who was the only known female buffalo soldier. Military leaders such as General George Crook and Black Jack Pershing also spent time at Fort Bayard too. The fort suffered its first Apache attack when it was only a year old and was a key post in the Apache Wars from 1861 to 1886. Particularly the 1879 and 1880 campaign against Victorio. However, after Jornamino surrendered in 1886, the post importance declined, and the most was deactivated as a troop correction in 1900. However, Army Surgeon General George M. Sternberg noted the good health enjoyed by Fort Bayard troops, successfully worked to maintain the post as an army hospital, primarily for the tuberculosis patients. In 1922, the fort was transformed to the Veterans Administration, who then utilized the site as a Veterans Administration hospital at the old fort through expansions and rebuilding. Modern hospital buildings flank the former parade ground, and houses were rebuilt along what was Officers' Row. And Design Doctors' Row was built on the foundations of the officers' quarters. The only major vestige of the old post was the cemetery on a hill overlooking the site, with graves dating back to the early fort's early establishment. The fort was particularly reactivated as a military installation during World War II, when a number of German prisoners of war were held at the fort from 1943 to 1945. The Veterans Administration continued to utilize the site until 1965. The following year, they transferred all but the cemetery to the state of New Mexico, utilized the site as a state hospital and a long-term nursing care facility. Fort Bayard Cemetery became part of the nursing facility a nursing facility. Okay, then the Fort Bayard Cemetery became part of the National Cemetery System and was placed on the National Register of Historic Places on July 7th of 2002. The hospital continues to be utilized by the state of New Mexico, but many of the old buildings are failing into disrepair. See, and that's sad. They should be rebuilding it. But they say that hospital, they see old soldiers in it sometimes. You know, they'll see old patients. There's a woman. There's a nurse that wanders the place. So it is pretty spooky too with your googly booglies. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. And I think the best story I did today was the second one, the New Mexico State Prison. I mean, that place sounds creepy, but Jesus, it had 3 riots there. So that place is just full of fucking bad energy, man. Bad energy. So, yeah, crazy, man. But that one was a good story. I really did like that one. That one really sounded like it'd scare the crap out of me. But I hope you guys liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, want to thank you guys for listening and subscribing. Keep telling your friends about it. Keep growing with me. And have a great day, man. Be spooky. Don't be getting scared. And like I said, y'all guys talk to me on Facebook if you want to. I got a page there. Ghost Stories Told from the South. Get in my DMs if you want to tell me a story or look up a story and talk about it. So we can interact there, man. I love doing that with my fans. But you guys have been good. Love you. See you later. And this has been Stephen LeBooth with Ghost Stories Told from the South. I hope you guys didn't get too scared. Sleep tight. Bye.